You are looking live in rainy Summerlin, Nevada, and I am looking live at the Looney Mansion in Hollywood where it's also raining too.
Yes, it is. And we need it, except in the burn areas, of course.
Oh, I can never admit that. I'm going to push back right as we open up the stream. I moved away from my youth and all my family and the people I love because it rained too much. So when people say we need the rain, there's a trigger that goes off in my brain saying, no, 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 we don't need the rain. Because in New York, where I grew up in Massapequa, it rained year round. And then we get to the summer, June, July, and August, when we get to go to the beach and it would rain. And I blame my teachers, not my parents, because my teachers never told me when I was 11 years old that all the bad weather from the Midwest and Chicago was blowing east. And then all the weather from Florida and the Gulf was blowing north to New York. So we got the worst weather of both areas of the country.
Isn't it amazing that immigrants came here from all over the world and decided to live where the bad weather was? Isn't that amazing? I'm stunned by it. And I forgot that was a trigger of yours. Yes, we both prefer droughts versus versus rain, and the future generations may laugh at that comment because we never got tired. Neither one of us, you in Vegas and when you lived here in Southern California, and me here in Southern California, we never got tired of walking out, looking up at the sky, and saying, "What a nice day."
Yeah, isn't it interesting also that when Christopher Columbus discovered America, he didn't want to discover Chicago and Des Moines and,
No.
and Omaha,
Now, he likes
Nebraska.
St. Augustine, Florida.
Right. I think he wanted everybody to stay in Florida, don't you?
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah, he landed in all the cool hot spots in Puerto Rico and Central America and South America and Florida. So yeah, he knew what he was doing.
Well, I'm back from New Orleans, so let's get right to it. Where I was right, you were wrong, but we were both wrong. Neither one of us expected a blowout. I had the Eagles 27-26. I thought it'd be a really tight game coming down to the wire. I didn't know when the game was 17 to nothing it would be over. I mean, really over before Kendrick Lamar at halftime.
Yeah, we had that. We were brain Tom Brady in our mind, and he was calling the game about okay, 24-0, 17-0. No matter what the score is, we've got another Tom Brady on this other team over here on the Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, and he can come back. If anybody can come back, Patrick can. Oh no, he can't. And the Eagles were just an all-around better team, and that defensive line really had an amazing game plan. And all year long, Patrick Mahomes was able to slip out of trouble, dump the ball off, and you expected that to happen over and over again in this Super Bowl, and it didn't.
Well, what got me about the Super Bowl, and I didn't stay, I was there all week. I got there Tuesday, I left Sunday before all the chaos. And I got so much to tell you about New Orleans in a moment here. But I put out a video yesterday, which is getting a lot of traction because I guess I'm the only member of the media not afraid to say that Andy Reid got outcoached in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that was a great video. It was a great video. You're right. For some reason, it doesn't fit the narrative of Andy Reid or Patrick Mahomes to go after them, and, people missed a chance to do that, except for you.
So what happened was he didn't make any adjustments. He didn't try to run the ball. He couldn't adjust on the offensive line. He didn't adjust after halftime because they got destroyed after halftime. And everything that he put in, it's called the install in football. Everything he installed the bye week before they got to New Orleans didn't work. And
Right.
last I looked, they were a damn good team. And Philadelphia was obviously better. They had a better roster, and I think they played better. They just had a better day. But in the history of the Super Bowl, that was maybe one of the top 4 or 5 worst coaching performances. And it happened to Andy Reid, a guy who got to the level with Lombardi, Tom Landry, Chuck Noll, all these legends over the last 10 years. And now he spit the bit and coached the worst game I've ever seen him coach.
And some legends have had some pretty bad Super Bowl losses and been out coached, including Don Shula was out coached as the way back in the day, long before our time when the Jets beat the Baltimore Colts. Don Shula was the choking coach of the Colts, and then got blown out in the Super Bowl by the Dallas Cowboys. He was the choking, losing coach. So even great coaches have great chokes in the past. And this was one of them on behalf of Andy Reid.
Well, Philadelphia was remarkable. They started two rookie corners, Cooper DeJean, not DeJean. It's easy to say, like Poupon, Gray Poupon. Cooper
Right.
DeJean.
It does sound like mustard.
He had a pick six. He was great. The defensive pass rush. Here's the biggest stat of the Super Bowl that is still blowing me away. They sacked Mahomes 6 times, and they never blitzed once. Okay, now wait a second. Everybody blitzes. You blitz in the first, second, third quarter. They didn't blitz once, Vic Fangio, because he's been going up against Andy Reid forever, and they got home.
They barely changed their defense, play to play to play, almost unheard of.
Yeah, I thought the game plan was incredible. Kelsey got old overnight, Tom. Holy shit, did he get old? I mean, he couldn't block and chip. He couldn't run a route. What was going on with him?
Did you see some of those videos where they cherry picked him being lazy out there? Yeah, and I mean, it's tough when people cherry pick your worst moments in life, whether it's on video or you're misbehaving in a store. We live with that now in this culture where people do that. But that was pretty bad as he stood there doing nothing, as Mahomes was running around, and the receivers have stuff. They're usually schooled in what to do when the quarterback's running around and in trouble. Get open, and he just was standing there. Did you see that video?
I did. A lot of it was happening in real time during the game because I was watching the game. I noticed that he could not do anything, and I thought, well, how about this? How about forget running a route? Just play offensive line. A lot of times tight ends are so good, and he's been good. Just stay in and pass protect because Mahomes is running for his life. And
Absolutely.
He couldn't even
and
do
you know what? That was, as you know, that was the rule in the NFL for the first 80 years because tight ends, I worked with the great Jim Mora. Playoffs, Jim Mora Sr. And I'll never forget in 2004, NFL Game Time React, I think it was called. And John Ireland was the host along with Mora. And John Ireland said, Coach, how come they don't throw to the tight end more often? That's how long it's been because they didn't throw to the tight end a lot in 2004. And he said, because they can't catch. Because you know how blunt Jim Mora was. Well, that's all changed. One of the greatest players now are tight ends. There was only a handful before 2004 that were ever any good. And so they always know how to block. They're usually the lineman with the best hands. And he at least could have done that. And you're right.
But what I wanted to ask you, and where do you stand on this? Because you watch a lot of NBA. You go to a lot of Laker games. What happens when a team just has a bad game? We know the Chiefs are great. They were going for a three-peat. They won 2 in a row. They only lost 2 games in the regular season. Their last game, they didn't play the starters, so throw that out. They really went the length of the year. They lost 1 game, and then they beat Buffalo, the powerful Bills. So it's not like they're a bad team. It just seemed like they had a bad game. Is that fair to say?
Well, it is fair to say, but we watched how I compared them to Muhammad Ali, the 70s Muhammad Ali near the end of his career when he would eke out victories, sometimes victories he didn't deserve. And the Chiefs were doing the same thing all year, and they were due to get their ass kicked, and it didn't happen until Super Bowl Sunday by a team that was well-rounded, much more well-rounded than the Chiefs are. So it's probably not all that surprising that they had their worst game in the Super Bowl because that was going to be the best team they were playing. We thought the best team they were playing all year was going to be the Buffalo Bills. We were wrong.
So I want to give a shout out as we begin the podcast to our 2 bosses that believe. Eric Weinberger, who had an unbelievable path at NFL Network, and Braun, our buddy Braun, who I got a chance to spend some really good time with. He threw a happy hour in New Orleans, and I got to the happy hour, and Braun, who now has hundreds upon hundreds of podcasts. When we started, got a handful, even more. Now he's got this mini empire, and he went to USC, and he was a professional surfer. And then when he got out of surfing, he went to SC, and he's hanging out with Matt Leinart and all these SC football players who were his great friends. And we had such a great time. He said hello, and we kicked back at this happy hour, and we talked a little bit about the future of podcasting and all that, but just wanted to thank them because they're really good people for everybody in this space of podcasting. Really good to connect with them again, and they had great things to say about us.
and Eric Weinberger. He and I go back to the best damn
Yeah.
sports show period. And we worked together there, and God, that was fun. You know, still to this day, if somebody runs into Chris Rose at 7-Eleven, it's still the number one question he gets. Hey, are they ever going to bring Best Damn back? It was a show such a high profile, they never should have let it go.
Well, I'm going to let you know this, and I was not planning on doing this at all,
Okay.
but I'm going to do this because when you were on Best Damn Sports Show, period, you got some pretty good ratings, I would assume. You know, it was
Yes,
kind
yes,
of the
we did.
beginning of cable talk at
Well,
that level.
it was the first Fox Sports Net launched as a competitor to ESPN, and it was really the only. I thought everything was on ESPN, you know, when they thought, but they knew Best Damn wasn't. It was the that's what actually why we lasted so long as well, because it was a show where people knew it wasn't on ESPN. They knew it was on Fox Sports Net, and we didn't have any other shows where it was that certain.
So the ratings for Fox Sports 1 as of today, as we host this podcast, and I like all these people. I do, but it's not going to sound like it when I tell you this.
Best Damn are working there.
Yeah, the Breakfast Ball Show at a 0.04 that has 33,000 viewers. Into the facility, I like that because James Jones, I work with the Raiders, that has 46,000 viewers total. Collins got 125. Nick Wright's got 154,000. The numbers there, but I can promise you, Tom Looney, when you worked on the Best Damn Sports Show period, you got a lot better ratings than the stuff they're throwing up. Dare I say more than 10 years later than the successful show you worked on, and they're nowhere near your numbers.
Yeah, during the Best Damn Sports Shows period, All-Star Summer, where I did all the commercials. It was so much fun. All through, we had a big blitz, a big sports talk radio blitz across the country. And I think we got a 3.5 that summer. And Tom Arnold pointed out to all of us that when he was writing Roseanne and on Roseanne, they got a 40. So we were all very excited about our 3, and he was laughing at us for our excitement. But yeah, it was a great time. We had good ratings, and it was a very unique show. And it was and still people still talk about it a lot, which shows. I remember when we went to see we were almost Cambridge. We were Oakmont, I think. We were Oakmont for the U.S. Open when Fox had golf. And we ran into Eric Shanks, my first producer at Best Damn, who's gone on to run Fox. And he was telling me about how people still walk up to him and talk to him about Best Damn. Maybe we should let it go.
Well, there was no Charlie Dixon there. He's in the penalty box for those who know, who know. I'll leave it there. We'll just look at your video reaction there. So quick overview of New Orleans if you have a second. I'll tell you this.
I got nothing but time.
Never in my life, in my entire life, have I seen military presence and police officers like I saw there. So it was good because you would believe that the more cops and military you see, the safer you are. Not the case. I watched the movie the other day, Black Hawk Down. There was a lot of military in Mogadishu, and there were a lot of people on the ground there. They weren't very safe. So when I walked through, and my son was there, which makes my heart full, my son's first ever trip to Bourbon Street. He's there. He was working. He had an unbelievable trip.
But you always dreamt of drinking with your kids one day.
Yes, that was a dream of mine. That was a dream of mine. I have a dream that someday I'd be still allowed to drink with my kids on Bourbon Street. So as soon as I got to Bourbon Street, at the top of Canal Street, where the terrorist event happened, where that vehicle pulled onto Bourbon Street because the city of New Orleans failed all those people who died because they didn't have the barrier up. And they had the barrier. They just didn't put it up. Well, the barrier was up. And there was vehicles that looked like tanks and Humvees right there blocking Bourbon Street. And then they had all the crosses of all those who died. I think it was 14 people. If I'm wrong, I apologize. And all the flowers and the shrine to all the dead on Bourbon Street. So then I started walking about a block. And I got to one of my favorite hotels, the Royal Sonesta. And at the corner, I counted 11 military with those machine guns that you only see in the Afghanistan movies, the long ones. And then on the other corner, there were 10 cops. on the same corner. And I said, oh boy, the president's coming on Sunday. This was Tuesday, and I knew I was in the middle of a war zone. The Super Bowl was a war zone, the way the United States government and the police and the National Guard treated New Orleans, and good for them. Everybody ended up being safe.
A whole podcast for another day would be what's wrong with us and why do we need this and why is this so unique to our culture? Because it kind of is. And another podcast would be a piece of advice I would have. I always say this to the people sleeping outside the night after the earthquake. Sleep outside the night before the earthquake. The problem is you don't know when it's coming. And I would say to the city of New Orleans, this you should have stepped it up before something happens, not after something happens. It's already happened. So that I always get a kick out of that when there's a high security, when people try to say, hey, look, we're protecting you now before it rained. Our mayor and all the muckety mucks got together to let us know they were ready for the rain. They didn't get together before those fires and let us know they were ready for the fires because they weren't. So the ex post facto ready for trouble makes me crazy.
The other thing that was very awkward, which I never experienced in my life before, there were too many guns. So for everybody who says, well, oh my God, you're going to be safe. Well, all it would have taken is someone with one of those machine guns to have a mental lapse or something to happen, or all these girls who are coming up to the cops and to the military taking selfies and wanting to get drunk and grab one of these guys. It got to the point where by the end of the trip, Saturday night, when I left Bourbon Street and said goodbye, I said, oh my God, man, we can't live in a society like this again, where you go to a sporting event and there's 30 guns and machine guns on every corner, every block. I hope we're not going down that road in American culture going forward.
Well, we don't have a can-do spirit with guns. We've got it with going to the moon. We've got it with vaccines. We've got it now with cleaning up the government. But when it comes to guns, everyone says, nothing you can do. It's the most un-American thing that happens in our culture compared to, I've had friends that moved here from England because they wanted some of that can-do spirit. My friend moved here from England and he ended up in the Palisades in a big home. And he came here with $300. He wanted some of our can-do spirit, how we turn poop into a business where we go around to rich people's houses and gather poop. He said English people never would have thought about it. He wanted some of that American DNA. That's why he moved to this country. It's why a lot of people do. But we don't have a can-do spirit when it comes to gun violence. And like you said, what if a military person had an episode? That's what happened in New Orleans. It was a military person who had an episode. So what if one of the military person who's there to make sure nobody has an episode has an episode? It's a great thought by you. It's quite a spooky one.
So a couple other things with New Orleans. I did the classic Radio Row. I got there Wednesday. You didn't miss much, Tom. It's now not Radio Row the way you and I did it for a long time. Oh. I don't want to say it jumped the shark. It hasn't. It's pretty important. But here's a couple observations. First off, it's the biggest convention center I've ever been to. The convention center in New Orleans is so big, if your Uber drops you off at the wrong end, you need another Uber to get, it's 1.5 miles long. It's like nothing you've seen. And I live in Vegas. We got a lot of conventions. Secondly, it was Podcast Row. Luckily, the Raiders were there for me because they booked all these incredible guests. I had Stephen A., which I booked, but I had Kurt Warner, Emmitt Smith, the typical Hall of Famers, and we did it on a nice set. That was good. But you didn't miss much because a lot of our veterans that you know in radio, they were just scratching their heads going, not a lot of people are coming back anymore. It's still the Emmitt Smith, Marcus Allen, Joe Montanas. We haven't found 20 years later the next tier of J.J. Watt. Brady's not going to go to that Radio Row.
They haven't plowed through their cash yet, JT. They'll be back.
Yeah, I guess so. They haven't gone broke yet. But it was interesting.
When we had Joe Montana on, which was the worst interview I ever did. A friend of mine back east, I was talking to I should talk to my brother who went to Notre Dame. I talked to my friend Grubba, the prison guard, and I said, what should I ask Joe Montana? He said, well, all of a sudden he's doing commercials now. All of a sudden we're seeing him again. Ask him if he plowed through all his cash. I said, I'm not going to ask him that. But that's what made me think of that when you said these guys aren't coming around. I said, well, they're not coming around yet.
So when Radio Row would end, I would Uber back to my hotel, which is about 10 minutes, 15 minutes outside New Orleans. And then I would Uber back into the belly of the beast, which was Bourbon Street, where my friends were, where my son was. And it was just controlled chaos because Fox, Big Fox with Terry Bradshaw and Howie, they had their set in the middle of Bourbon Street. So if you're walking down Bourbon Street with, it felt like hundreds of thousands of people, how many there were, you'd kind of have to get to the side. You'd have to go down this. Ubers couldn't get into that region, so you couldn't get picked up. So the end of the night, it's 1 a.m. and it looks like it's 9 p.m. There's no difference between 1 a.m. and 9 p.m. And you go hit your Uber app or a Lyft, they're not coming. You got to walk a mile to some hotel or back to Canal Street and hope that an Uber's coming. So it was really controlled, a lot of guns, a lot of military, a lot of cops. I love New Orleans, but if I never go back again, let me take that back. Of course I'm going to go back. But if I never go back in the near future, I'm good because that place just takes a lot out of you physically and mentally.
Oh, it does. Well, it does. And it's a party town. And so you have to be in that, 19-year-old jean jacket with the rock album on the back of your jean jacket type of mood. So when you go to New Orleans, because it's party, eat, party, eat, party, eat. But one thing, at least the upside there is it sounds like you got your steps in. Did you get your 10,000 steps a day in?
It was one day I had 23,000 steps, which I noticed, which was pretty interesting there. And then the highlight for me, my radio and TV partner with the Raiders, Eric Allen, got into the Hall of Fame. And I think you'll like this story. A quick backstory is I knew ahead of time. I was one of the only people. He told me. And he told me to keep a secret because when they do the knock on the door, they do the knock on the door like a week in advance in your hometown. So they knocked on his door in Point Loma, San Diego. And it was still a surprise to everyone. So much so that the night he got in on NFL Honors, I went to a cigar party hosted by Ron Jaworski. And Sal Palantonio was the guy who spoke on behalf of Eric Allen inside the hall for the vote. They didn't know. I knew. So I'm sitting there having a drink with John Gruden, Sal Palantonio, and Ron Jaworski. And I go, how great is it that Eric Allen got in? I held the secret that long. And Sal Pal looked at me and said, what? I go, yeah, he got in. He put his drink down and raced to the NFL Honors to go meet him there, which was great. And then seeing Eric Allen was special, but when I interviewed him, I was the first to ever interview him. And it was the first time in my 30-year career, Tom, including working with you for a lot of it, that I broke down like a baby. Pure tears coming down my face, couldn't speak. It brought me that much joy. So that was the highlight for me, a Super Bowl 59, my 29th Radio Row that I was able to do that interview.
Touch on that for a minute because people forget about these. They're not cartoons sometimes. You've had a couple of runs with John Gruden, so I know how crazy you are about John Gruden and how tough that drama was for you when that happened. And because it's a guy on TV or a guy who wrote an unfortunate email. It's a fellow human being who you've spent time with throughout the years, and high moments and low moments. And same thing with Eric Allen and family, who you've worked with.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting because when you work with a guy who's in his 19th year of eligibility for the Hall, so 18 other times he didn't get in, and other times he was a finalist and a semifinalist. I already knew he was in. I kept the secret. I held the secret for about 4 or 5 days. And then when I was able to interview him, it was just overwhelming joy that turned into emotion and tears, because I felt like I was a little part of that journey. And in the interview, he thanked me for trying to help him pivot because it wasn't working, getting him in. Whatever he was doing to try to get it out there and who was pushing him. And we pivoted a little bit. And I told him this year, go on the Jim Rome show, go on these shows, get your name out there again. And he gave me credit for that, which is why I think I got so emotional. And then knowing that this August I'll be with them in Canton with my wife and his wife and kids, and that's going to be really cool. And it was, for me, when you work with someone every week and you care about them, it means that much more. So I was really proud of that.
And I think the major headline here and the headline for the show as we slug it for the podcast will be JT the Brick was told a secret and he held it for 5 days. That would be the headline of this show. That's not easy for you.
Oh, my wife told me that too. Like, be quiet. Don't do that. And I want to push back on this a little bit. I've been known to exaggerate. I don't think I lie. I've been known to exaggerate.
Oh, wait, we're both hyperbolic. Yeah.
And I think I keep a pretty good secret right until the end. Right as the secret's coming down and there's like another hour or two left of the secret, I'm the worst. Like, you got to lock me up because when I think it's safe to tell the secret, that's when I start telling it.
Well, I can vouch for that. You've kept a few of mine over the years. I can definitely.
Very good. Very good. Someday I'll be on the cover of USA Today, the great secret keeper, and they'll read, how is JT the Brick there? But so New Orleans, next year the Super Bowl will be in San Francisco, but that's a lie. The game will be played in Santa Clara, which is nowhere near San Francisco. It's closer to San Jose. And I got to get your opinion on Kendrick Lamar because I knew that Kendrick Lamar was going to sing his songs. I mean, he wasn't going to do a cover of Michael Jackson and Prince. It's his Super Bowl. But man, the white community and the elderly white community lost their bleeping mind when Kendrick Lamar started singing his Kendrick Lamar songs.
Oh, that's always happened generationally. I used to go out for Sunday rides. That's what my grandfather used to do with the killer aunts, with my two widowed aunts and my grandmother. And that's the number one thing. And the number one thing over all the way back throughout the centuries that people bitch about is the young and the new trends and the new music. Nothing has changed. I remember them talking about how rock and roll was. They're just shouting. It doesn't take any talent. People will say that when rap came along, people would say it took no talent or whatever. Music changes and evolves. And some people, unlike you and me, some people don't embrace any. You embrace some new music. But music is like colors for the ears. Being judgmental about it is silly. It's different things to different people. And I have to say this. I knew it was going to be a 40-minute halftime show. I have a husky. If I don't give a husky something to do, huskies will find something to do. And I take my husky out for a walk every day, or just so he won't run away to Alaska. It's quid pro quo relationship. And so halftime, I took the husky for a walk, so I didn't see it.
I thought it was okay. I mean, my son was there, and he's a big Kendrick Lamar fan. And he said there was no excitement in the building because, as you know, it's a corporate event. So the people who are at that event who could afford the tickets are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they're not the Kendrick Lamar, demo. So they're not going to love it.
We're in the advertising business. You can call it broadcasting all you want. We filler between commercials, and once a lot of people, not us, get over 54. Not that we're over 54, and they stop buying new products, including music, and so they're not aiming the halftime show at people who like Paul McCartney.
Good point. So when that concert was going on at halftime, I tweeted out in real time, Metallica next year, Metallica in San Francisco or in Santa Clara, and I bookmarked it. You could save that now thanks to Elon. You could bookmark it. And I'm telling you, you won't believe how many people, not on my timeline, but every other timeline, a day or two later, are sick and tired of Jay-Z, who took control with Rock Nation at a time where the NFL wanted to reach out and be more diverse, fact, not fiction. The commissioner brought in Jay-Z, and now Jay-Z's putting all his guys in at halftime, which I'm okay with. We had Snoop, and we had Dre, and 50 Cent, and Eminem, and now we got Kendrick Lamar. And, let's not forget we had Usher in Vegas, which I did not like. Did not like Usher on his roller skates. So what's it gonna take to get a country artist, Tom, or maybe rock and roll again? Maybe we can find a rock and roll band to play Super Bowl 60. I mean, San Francisco was a cradle to rock and roll and music.
Well, I do know the lead singer for Show Me the Horizon. They're filling stadiums in Europe. I'll make a few phone calls. That's a great rock and roll band right now. And I do have some inside contacts with the Arctic Monkeys. sounds like a punchline, but it's not. So I'll have some of my people talk to the NFL.
Holy shit, Luca looks so slow. You know the term, he's carrying a piano on his back. So he comes to the Lakers, and I didn't think he was going to be fat. Everyone would say, "Oh, Luca's got to be out of shape. He's 20." He was fine. He got off the plane. He looked fine. I watched the 2 games he's played so far. You know the guys who can't jump or they can barely lift their foot over jump rope. I mean, it just and LeBron.
The tall guys on your high school team that you wish were better basketball players. Yes.
LeBron's 40, Luka's 25. LeBron is catching alley-oops. His nose is even with the rim and he's slamming it down. God, Tom, I know it's going to work out eventually, but Luka looks old. He's such a great example of a guy who's older than his age because he's 25, but he's been playing professional basketball overseas since he's been 15. Where there were no masseuses and they didn't travel on private jets and they didn't do what they do in the NBA. I think you might have got a guy who's 25, but he might be like 32 in NBA years. What do you think?
Well, he's moving. The way he moves around, he does move around like a country artist out there. As you were mentioning, one of a country artist. Yeah, we got him playing for the Lakers. He doesn't move with the same savoir-faire as a lot of American athletes do. He's kind of a lumbery white guy going on the court. And so I think people sometimes mix that up with lack of skill. I don't think he's lacking any skill, but I will say maybe now he will have more access to maybe some of LeBron's people and maybe a personal stretcher, a personal masseuse, and most importantly, a personal chef. And when you have a personal chef filling you up with stuff that's not going to make you fat, then maybe that'll help him out.
So Mark Cuban didn't have that, even though Mark Cuban's worth more than Jay Moore and Jeannie combined. Mark Cuban didn't have the chef and the guy to stretch him out in the morning. Mark Cuban didn't know about that with Luka.
Good point. He's too young and dumb because when you're 25 or younger, no matter how high your basketball IQ is or your scholastic IQ, you do dumb things. And he doesn't, you don't realize what you have, even if you have the world in the palm of your hand, you don't realize it because it all came so easy. But it's not going to continue to come easy, to quote the great Ringo Starr. And if he wants to continue the career, he's going to have to start utilizing nutritionists and personal trainers.
I always like who the villain is in sports because Aaron Rodgers was a big story today. As we record the podcast, as it's February 13th, whenever you consume it. So Aaron Rodgers, we'll save that for another one. But the athlete in all major sports is always a bad guy that everybody looks at. Draymond Green was a bad guy when the Warriors were winning. Well, the new bad guy plays for the Warriors. His name is Jimmy Butler, and he is a scoundrel, and I am so against him now. I always thought he was a great player, played hard. He forced his way out of Miami. No state taxes and palm trees. Made Pat Riley very uncomfortable and a guy named Eric Spoelstra, a multiple champion, and forced his way to the fucking Warriors, dude. The Warriors. Not OKC, not Minnesota, not Portland. Damian Lillard at least went from Portland to Milwaukee. How dare Jimmy Butler treat the fans of Miami this way and be rewarded with a better team and a better opportunity playing with Steph Curry? This topic really pisses me off.
Yeah, and we it continues to be kind of an American way now. We are rewarding bad behavior rather than shunning bad behavior. It seems to be across the board, business world, political world, sports world, and we're not doing anything about it. I don't know why it's happening. But he shouldn't. Yeah, he shouldn't. It bothers us, especially when it happens in sports. And forget the salary. I don't want to be the guy who says, "I don't like Kendrick Lamar. They're paying these athletes all this money." You don't want to do that cliche. This isn't about money. It's about behavior. And I think it's just as easy always to tweet something kind, or to treat someone with manners. It takes the same amount of energy, or maybe even less, than to treat others poorly.
I just think the NBA is so tone deaf because last night the Warriors played Dallas. Really good game. Dallas ended up beating the Warriors, and Steve Kerr after the game was so upset. he went to the media because ESPN made the game start late, 8:45 Dallas time. So he was going from Dallas to Houston to play a back-to-back tonight. And Steve Kerr lost his mind because he said they're not going to get into Houston until 3 in the morning. Fact. And he's not going to play some of the veterans because of the late landing and the back-to-back. So I went on the radio today before this podcast and said,
I don't want to cry like you with Eric Allen. Sorry, Steve.
Can you believe that Bill Russell used to have to take buses and be on commercial airplanes? Babe Ruth used to have to be on a train in between cities. These guys are landing. You know what happens when you land with the Warriors private charter at 3 a.m.? A giant Sprinter van and buses pick you up. They take you to the Four Seasons.
They load your stuff for you.
Yep. They unload your stuff. They pick up all your stuff. They do your laundry. You can get a private masseuse if you need it in the morning. They have catered breakfast. Then you go to shoot around, and then you play maybe 32 or 36 minutes if you're lucky. And they have something called timeouts and halftime, so you can get rest. So you can get rest during the game. And I could not believe that Steve Kerr would be so tone deaf, because I said on the air today, I got moms who listen to my show who are single moms that have 2 jobs, and they work casinos in Vegas. They get off at 11 at night, and they got to go to their other job, their overnight job, or work at another hotel at 6 in the morning. And I'm supposed to feel for the NBA players that are playing back-to-backs? Are you kidding me?
And 3 months ago, they were paying $1.98 for their eggs, and which the cheapest thing to feed your family with. And now it's $18. It is tone deaf, and it's why we never did frickin' frack radio. We didn't always know what the other person was going to say, whether we were going to agree or not. And I'm glad we're on the same page here. This is like a Saturday Night Live skit, a white people problems Saturday Night Live skit. Well, everyone was puking on my cruise. Well, you're on a cruise though, right? And you weren't puking. You're fine. Or even if you did get food poisoning on your cruise in Europe, you can't really complain about it into a microphone, at least. Whispered in hushed tones to the other people within your own profession. He's usually smarter than that. I'm surprised.
All right, and it's the favorite segment that's taken over the world on the podcast, the JT and Looney podcast. What are you watching? I'll go first so you can get your thoughts together. I just finished American Primeval. American Primeval on Netflix, directed by Peter Berg, a great filmmaker. He's done a little of everything. I mean, this guy, just look at what he's done, is incredible. It's the story about the Mormons, led by Brigham Young, pushing west. And they're pushing west through the western frontier, where there's already an American presence of soldiers fighting the Indians as the Indians are getting pushed out of their land. And the scenes, same also producer from the movie The Revenant, which I loved, Leonardo DiCaprio won the Academy Award in The Revenant. Yeah. Tom, I'm telling you, these scenes on the American frontier between the Mormons fighting the Indians and the Indians fighting us, it's so graphic. It's so intense. The Mormons were so persecuted. This has a different spin on some of the bad Mormons. But I don't know how anybody fucking got out west in our lifetime. I don't know anybody, your grandparents, my great-grandparents' generations, who would go in a covered wagon, even with 10 people in covered wagons, and come over a ridge where Native Americans and Indians were nervous about losing their land and kill them instantly. You couldn't protect yourself, and still people made it out west. This shows it and depicts it more than anything I've seen recently since The Revenant.
So much to unpack with what you said there. You think of the 49ers are called the 49ers because in 1849, all those people moved to San Francisco. And you're like, how'd they get there? You know, those are people on a journey. Pet peeve here. I digress. People who talk about their weight loss journey. Putting down a fork is not a journey. Getting to San Francisco on a covered wagon in 1849, that's a journey. So the most overused word right now is journey, and it's driving me crazy. I digress. It's an amazing story, and I haven't seen the movie. I do know some of what they went through historically because we've had Mormon friends growing up. My mother would always invite them into the house because, Elmira, a very conservative area, Elmira, New York, were very liberal about drinking, drugs, etc. So she wanted us to see what nice boys did with their lives. So she always, when the Mormons were coming around, she would always invite them in. And so I got to know a lot about, and they started out in upstate New York, in Palmyra, New York, and they had to go west because that's what this movie is all about. And you're right when it comes to people complaining about having to fly first class from Dallas to Houston to play their basketball game and eat filet mignon on the plane, when other people had to come over a ridge in a covered wagon, not knowing whether they're going to die. That this ridge or the next 14 ridges we got to go over, and that's a good reason to see that movie.
And the weather alone. If you didn't leave at the right time, if you didn't wait till spring, or you were out there on the frontier, and you're dead. There's just no way you could survive that weather with a blanket and a horse and a teep.
And it's movies like that give you perspective. Sometimes when we do complain about our problems, from Steve Kerr to you and me, and we complain about our problems and having to, get back, get back in the Super Bowl because I got to do my TV show or my radio show, which we do privately on the phone. But we realize we laugh at ourselves because of perspective, and movies like that give you a great perspective.
So again, I saw the Bob Dylan movie. I loved it. I gave it 4 out of 5 bricks. I'm not going to go see.
Did you see it at the theater or at home?
Theater. I went to the theater with my wife. Loved it. Loved the movie. Thought Timothy Chalamet did a great job playing Bob Dylan. I think the actress is going to win the Academy Award for Best Supporting, playing Joan Baez. Edward Norton was fantastic in it. So I would go see it. But I'm having this problem, and we're going to have Lights, Camera, Jackson on quickly. I feel pissed off that I didn't see enough movies going into the Academy Awards. I like to know at least a couple of the performances, and I'm just not going to have time to do it. How about you?
Oh, yeah, and it makes me feel bad, too, kind of since the pandemic. I haven't, because remember when the awards would come out, I was always going and saying my work has been done, because a lot of times I would have already seen the nominated films. Not the case this year, although I did see up for several nominations. A Real Pain. Did you see that?
No.
Oh, you got to see it. It is. Let me take a look here. Kieran Culkin
and Jesse Eisenberg,
and their cousins. You're close with your cousins. Yep. I'm close with my cousins. And whether it's a cousin or a friend, everyone's got cousins and friends, or sometimes you travel or you spend too much time together, you drive each other crazy. And you and I both, over the years, whether dating or with friends, a lot of times the shy people gravitate towards the talker. So it's the shy cousin and the talker. And it's about, but one of them's from Binghamton, one's from Manhattan. It was a very funny moment in the movie. And I won't give too much more away. It's a great film written by Jesse Eisenberg. Shout out to Jerry. There was one point in the movie where they get into a little guilt trip, pushed back and forth, and the one says to the other, "You never come and visit me." And then Jesse says, "Well, you live in Binghamton. I live in Manhattan. You should be visiting me." That's a very funny inside New York joke that happens throughout the movie, but you'll love the movie.
All right, and lastly, I love Doge. I don't care if it's Republicans, Independents, Democrats. Mm-hmm. I want a forensic look at government waste. My dad, Department of Health and Human Services, my dad was a deputy chief auditor. What did he do? He audited for a living. That's what he did. I grew up the son of an auditor and a high-end accountant. So I love Doge. I'm an Elon guy. I got his cars. I got his stock. I'm an Elon guy. I don't think Elon's trying to take your money. I don't think he's trying to take your money. He's got plenty of money. He's got 12 kids, which concerns me. Anyone who has 5, 6, 7 kids, or NBA players that have 9 kids, I get a little concerned when you have 12. But he thinks that we're going to run out of our population. But here's the deal. Our president is dropping so many news conferences and doing so much every day that the news cycle, which you're involved with and I'm involved with, can't keep up with him. So I'm not saying he's good or bad. I'm not here to talk politics. But when he does 4 things on a Tuesday, and then the AP and the Daily Mail and CBS and ABC starts producing and going, hey, let's debate this, He's dropping fucking 5 more stories the next day, so you don't want to go back, Tom. This is the most amazing time in the history of political media and how you keep score. How are you keeping score?
Well, it's a way to make people, a lot of times not that much. President can do a lot of things or leave things alone. You all program directors like Trump drove you crazy. Meddling, 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 right? You like the ones that left us alone. And that would be the debate. Does the country just need to be left alone with the low unemployment, et cetera? Or should we just fix eggs and real estate and leave everything else alone? Because everything else pretty much is doing really well. Or the argument would be efficiency. My brother was also a big efficiency guy, and so it's just so they don't do it politically. And I don't want people to die from not getting vaccines and food overseas. I want to be careful, but if there's waste there, no problem. But I also, one of the greatest things we do as for our spread goodwill with our country is right now nowhere in the world, because of us, nowhere in the world is a child born where he's not 10 miles away from a smallpox vaccine and the vaccines you need as a child. That's because of the United States of America. That's good news. There's no good news channel. And I don't want to stop that goodwill that we provide around the world with medicine and food. But if there's waste within that program, well, why not fix it?
As you know, I lean to the right, but I don't believe in building condos and developing Gaza in the next 2 years, nor do I believe taking food away from people who are starving overseas at all. And there's certain things I like and don't like about Doge, but I just love when they find corruption. I don't care if you're on the left or the right. When they find me a nugget, when they find me the price of this or something they were trying to do overseas and it's true, and they tell me and I go, holy shit. And well, maybe a Republican president came up with that idea. Maybe the Democrat couldn't get rid of it, but it came to 2024, 2025 with the richest man in the world who owns X. He owns Tesla. He owns SpaceX. My favorite company for Elon is the Boring Company. They're building underground here in Vegas, 50 stops. It's incredible. I can do a podcast on that. But Elon really seems to enjoy looking for political corruption and waste. I'm fascinated by that. I thought he'd want to be on a yacht in Saint-Tropez fishing or being on one of his rockets like Richard Branson. Tom, he's sleeping in the White House trying to find fraud.
Well, what wouldn't you prefer it if he was trying to be the guy that solves world hunger, which would be nice if we had a rich person trying to do that. But when it comes to corruptions, they're all getting pardoned anyway. The mayor of New York deserve a pardon.
Eric Adams.
Or what about Bogdanovich or whatever his name is from Chicago? Those are Democrats too. So I don't like I don't like the political corruption pardons, but I don't mind if they find corruption in business.
Yeah, I just think we're living, we always say as we wrap this up, we're living in incredible times. And if we were living in the 60s, if you were living in the early 60s where JFK got assassinated, Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy, the Vietnam War was coming, you'd be like, holy shit, this is a pretty unbelievable time we're living in. And then you go to the 70s, you go to the 90s. But to be living here in 2025 and to watch the press conference coming from that new sassy blonde who's yelling at everyone, yes. And she's a whip. And then to see Elon with his kid on his shoulders in the Oval, to see the Diet Coke button working, and to see the news that's happening every day. I can't keep up with it, and I like to keep up with this. I can't keep up with it, which is telling me, Tom, that our media is being tested because I think our media is getting smaller because of X and the way TikTok we get our information. And I think the media can't keep up with what's actually happening right now.
And, you worry about that because great, investigations are what changed the world for good. Great independent media and news media investigations. You know why we're so hard on drinking and driving in this country? 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
60 Minutes did a special in the early 80s on the scourge of drinking and driving, and it changed America. That's just one example. Great journalism and great news outlets and great independent news outlets can change the world for the good, as I guess you would agree with me on drinking and driving and the how it was just a slap on the wrist before 60 Minutes, and it's still a great organization there. And so we have to make sure that we find media we can trust, and we know we can trust it, and that's getting murky.
Last thing, we need everybody to subscribe and like as I talk to Bron. And, we do this for free, close to free. We do this because we love to talk to each other. Tom's doing a bunch of stuff. I'm doing a bunch of stuff. We hope everybody appreciates this. But the only way it's going to work is if you hit subscribe and like and you share it. Tell people about the JT and Looney podcast wherever you get it. We know we're better than a lot of these other podcasts that have 2 or 3 guys talking about stuff. But the point is, we want to get it out to the masses. So if you could help us, we'd greatly appreciate it.